Good evening. And welcome to everyone who's joining us on the internet. The correction of error. What's another way of saying that? The correction of misperception. And how does misperception get corrected? By providing the conditions in which a miracle can occur. And what is a miracle? A sudden shift of perception. And how do you provide the conditions for a miracle to occur? By abandoning your best judgments, by abandoning your thinking, by becoming still and going within and asking to know the truth. Asking of whom or what? The Holy Spirit. That which is nothing more than your right mind. By asking your guide. Or by asking God. In other words, you provide the conditions for a miracle, a sudden shift of perception, by reaching beyond your memory, by reaching beyond your strongest beliefs, by joining with something beyond the realm of your limited conscious awareness, or the area of your unlimited conscious awareness that you have circumscribed and bound yourself to. You provide the conditions for a miracle to occur by abandoning your isolation. And you abandon it by inviting something else in. When you do that, and a sudden shift of perception occurs, error is corrected. Misperception leaves you. Causing you to no longer be looking at your world through the lens of your misperception, and allowing you to see everything through the eyes of God. In other words, with the capacity to see what is truly there, with the concurrent or simultaneous awareness that you who are looking at it are the presence of mind, which is the mind of God. So it isn't you seeing something awesome where you had seen something quite ordinary in the past. It's you being something quite awesome, seeing that which is quite awesome that you had missed before when you thought you were what you believed you were and looked at everything through that lens. This section is relatively easy to understand without explanation. The alertness of the ego to the errors which other egos make is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit, that which is nothing more than your right mind, would have you maintain. Again, the alertness of the ego to the errors which other egos make is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain. Egos are critical in terms of the kind of sense they stand for. They understand this kind of sense because it is sensible to them. To the Holy Spirit, it makes no sense at all. To the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors and correct them. Well, where does the correction, where is the error that the ego is trying to correct? It's always out there, in someone else or something else, or in a circumstance, or in a political system, whatever. To the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors and correct them, which involves manipulating your world out there to correct the errors, to correct those who are coming from erroneous places, who are thinking erroneously and behaving badly because of their erroneous perceptions. But that doesn't fit in, does it, with what I described as the means for the correction of error? Because what I described had nothing to do with manipulating anything out there. It had to do with you providing the conditions under which the miracle could occur, the sudden shift of perception in you. The result of which is your seeing with new eyes, not bound by your previous concepts and misperceptions. Again, to the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors and correct them. This makes perfect sense to the ego, which is totally unaware of what errors are and what correction is. Well, we discussed what errors are. They are misperceptions, believed by you, by anyone. And the correction of misperception occurs in you by your, again, providing the environment, the conditions in which a sudden shift of perception can occur. You must ask the question, where is the error? And who is suffering from it? If you say the error is out there, causing bad behavior out there, which I'm suffering from, you're already caught in the dream, and you are not providing the conditions under which a sudden shift of perception can occur, which is what will constitute the correction of error. The error lies in the fact that you are not looking at your brother or at your world with God or with the Holy Spirit. You're doing it all by yourself in the privacy of your very private definition of yourself. In other words, as an orphan. That is where the error is, and that is what the error is, and that is the only place that the error can be corrected that will suddenly cause you to become what could be called an agent for change, a healer. Indeed, you do have brothers and sisters who are suffering from their own misperceptions, and they are behaving on the basis of their misperceptions, their misunderstanding of who they are. And they deserve not to be suffering from that, just as much as you. When you go within, and you join with the Father or the Holy Spirit, and you allow the miracle to occur, the sudden shift of perception within you to occur, you will now not behave toward your misperceiving brother as though the error is there and you must correct it there. You will be with that brother knowing what he truly is, because you will be seeing something awesome there. And as I said, that vision will be accompanied by the awareness, the consciousness that you are, is itself something awesome. And the awesomeness of what you are and the awesomeness of what your brother is will cause you not to attack him, not to try to change him, but to be with him in a way that is so utterly benign that he cannot help but feel the love that he is embraced with or embraced by when he's with you, causing him to feel a level of safety and even courage to dare to drop his defense. You will be an agent for change because the movement of love that will be engendered by you, by your letting it through, will be recognized by him or her. And the invitation for him to put down his defenses will not be perceived as coercion or as an attempt to correct. Because remember, whenever you engage in attempting to correct a brother, there is an unstated premise to your attempt, and that is that your brother is at fault. There is a judgment there, and your brother feels that. And that immediately calls for defense and causes your brother to see you as a manipulator, coming from the same ego place he or she is coming from, which means that your motives for manipulation are self-serving to you, and that one better defend himself vigorously. This is why the attempt to correct a brother doesn't work and does initiate and bring forth strong, radical defense. Even though there isn't a bit of sense to the defense. Even though you can see that the defense is insane. Continuing, errors are of the ego. And correction of errors of any kind lies where? Not in changing the egos of others, but it lies solely in the relinquishment of the ego. And who's going to relinquish it? The one who sees errors out there to correct. Who's going to relinquish it? The only one you know about. You. When you correct a brother, continuing, when you correct a brother, you are telling him that he is wrong. He may be making no sense at the time, and it is certain that if he is speaking from the ego, he will be making no sense. But your task is still to tell him he is right. Now listen to the next sentence. You do not tell him this verbally if he is speaking foolishly, because he needs correction at another level, since his error is at another level. There is a rather foolish New Age premise that everyone is creating his own reality, and no one has a right to override it because it's a gift of God or from God to you to be able to create your own reality. That is your function. That is what you're in this experience for. Therefore, no one has the right to tell you that you are wrong. You have a God-given right to create your own reality without objection from any quarter. That is foolishness. This can be carried further by those who pick up the Course who are unclear and think that this is indeed supporting that premise. And so one reads and it says, but your task is still to tell him he is right. No, he's not right in his misperception. But you know what? The key element here is that no matter how your brother or sister is behaving, in fact, no matter how any one of you is behaving, ignorantly, based upon misperceptions you have, it doesn't change the fact that, although forgotten by you, you are, at this instant, the full and direct expression of God. It is God who is embodying himself, herself, right there where you are. And nothing else is present but what God is being right there where you are. And the acknowledgement of this is the acknowledgement that you are fundamentally right. Your very being is right. Your very being is flawless, innocent at this moment. Your behavior doesn't reflect that fact. And correction is called for there. But your misbehaving based upon your misperceptions doesn't change what you divinely are. And some one of you, with everyone else, with every other one of you, must dare to take the radical stand that the one you are confronted by is fundamentally right. is fundamentally the Christ. Someone must dare to look at his brother or sister with the conscious intent of acknowledging that, instead of continuing down the path of the general misperception that everyone is just a mortal, a product of a sperm and an egg, a physical organism, or perhaps a little bit better, a spirit, temporarily in a body and appearing to be a material organism. You have to start daring to be radical enough to look at your miserable brother and not believe what you're seeing, to contradict it in your mind by acknowledging what is true. Now, you have book learning, you have knowledge, you might say, from having read the course, from having been with me in these sessions. You have knowledge as to what the truth about your brother is, and on the basis of that knowledge, you can break the habit of what you used to think by thinking something new. But that is not all it takes, because that's not you experiencing what is true. But if you will abide with the knowledge you have gained and be with it rather than being in a constant state of reaction to your brother's bad behavior, you will provide the conditions under which a miracle can occur in you. The conditions under which you will suddenly find yourself relinquishing the ego, your ego. And that's the point at which you become an agent for change and healing can begin to occur. Your task, continuing, is still to tell him he is right. You understand the difference here? It doesn't mean that you look at him and at his behavior and at what he's saying and you say, yes, that's right, that's right. You have the right to create your own reality and you're doing quite a job of it and you're right. No. Your task is still to tell him he, the divine one that he is right. And the divine one that he is that is right is present at the very moment that you're saying it, in spite of his ignorant behavior. You dare to take the radical stand of acknowledging what is true about him right when he is behaving badly. You do not tell him this verbally if he is speaking foolishly, because he needs correction at another level, since his error is at another level. He, now listen, he is still right because he is a son of God. You see, the level at which the change has to occur is within him, where he's willing to make a shift in his perception as to what he is, not just a tentative and short-lived physical organism, but as an eternal presence of mind that is God being himself right there where that mind is, period. He is still right because he is a son of God. His ego is always wrong, no matter what it says or does. If you point out the errors of your brother's ego, you must be seeing through yours, because the Holy Spirit does not perceive his errors. Holy Spirit, that which is nothing more than your right mind. Your right mind does not perceive your brother's errors. So if you're seeing errors to be corrected, you're not seeing through anything other than your very own ego. And you're not in a position to be an actual agent for change. You're only in a position to exert more force, more apparent power than the strength of your brother's conviction as to his way of looking at things, and causing him, for self-preservation, to yield to the force that you bring to bear upon him. But both of you are still totally ignorant of what you are, and there is nothing present to be an agent for change. No healer/healing present or possible. Again, if you point out the errors of your brother's ego, you must be seeing through yours, because the Holy Spirit does not perceive his errors. This must be true if there is no communication at all between the ego and the Holy Spirit. Why isn't there any communication at all between the ego and the Holy Spirit? Because you've divorced the two. When you divorced the Father and said, "Father, I would rather see it my way," you caused a split between yourself, what you currently call yourself, and what you divinely are, which is called the Holy Spirit, until you remember who you are. And then you become the Son of God, the presence of God, as an experience. The ego, continuing, makes no sense, and the Holy Spirit does not attempt to understand anything that arises from it. He does not. Since he does not understand it, he does not judge it, knowing that nothing it engenders, meaning the ego, means anything. The next section is entitled Sanity and Perception. When you react at all to errors, you are not listening to the Holy Spirit. Why? Because the Holy Spirit doesn't see errors. It does see calls for correction. But it's like this. There's an old car, a junk heap, parked in a field. And a plant starts to grow underneath the junk heap, the junk car. And as it grows up, it bumps into the underside of the car and can't proceed further. Well, from an ego standpoint, the correct response would be to say to that plant, "What a fool you are for germinating there. Look at you. You can't grow tall like you're supposed to. You've started growing in a place where you are hit by an obstacle and blocked from normal growth. How foolish of you."